Too soon to say we're in an endemic phase. COVID-19 infections are spiking again worldwide, following the last peak in March. The number of confirmed cases has surpassed 552 million, according to the World Health Organization. South Korea is also seeing infection numbers multiply, with confirmed cases on Monday topping 30,000 for the first time in 2 months. The government is drawing up a new response plan, with President Yoon ordering the Prime Minister to draw up scientific measures. A top U.S. security advisor visits Seoul amid increasing concern that North Korea is on the verge of conducting a 7th nuclear test. Councillor Derek Chalet will be addressing how to strengthen the bilateral alliance.
Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. COVID-19 returns as our top story this morning after a couple quiet months, with it back on an upward trend in South Korea as more than 30,000 new cases have already been confirmed as of 9 p.m. Monday.
A total of 35,805 new cases were reported, which is almost 3 times the figure announced at the same time the day before. And it's the first time in around 8 weeks that the figure has surpassed the 30,000 mark. The number is twice last Monday's 9 p.m. tally and almost 4 times more than 2 weeks before, clearly indicating a doubling of cases. To deal with the uptick, South Korea launched an advisory committee to deal with the pandemic on Monday. The team of experts held their first meeting under the Yoon administration, which has pledged to devise science-based quarantine measures. Participants discussed ways to better respond to the resurgence of the virus in the summer, and they emphasized the need to focus on minimizing the number of deaths and to protect those at high risk by strengthening the nation's medical system. Health authorities believe Korea is in a new wave of the virus and are set to make an announcement on preventive measures this Wednesday. Many parts of the world are currently grappling with a resurgence of COVID-19 infections driven by Omicron's variants. Meanwhile, the WHO is warning of yet another strain that's reportedly spreading rapidly. Our Kim Yo-sun has this story.
As COVID-19 plagues countries throughout the world, the Asian gambling center Macau is no exception. Local authorities on Monday decided to shut all the city's casinos for the first time in over 2 years, as around 1,500 people have tested positive for COVID-19 in the past 3 weeks. Over 30 casinos, as well as other non-essential businesses, were shut for 1 week, while residents were ordered to stay at home, aside from making short trips for essential services. The world continues to witness growing numbers of COVID-19 cases amid the recent emergence of the new Omicron BA.5 variant. The BA.5 variant has already been identified across 83 countries. The variant has now also become the most dominant strain in the U.S., leading to more people contracting the virus multiple times in relatively quick succession. The WHO has issued a warning over a subvariant that is known to have a stronger transmission power.
In Europe and America, BA4 and BA5 are driving waves. In countries like India, a new sublineage of BA2.75 has also been detected, which we're following.
Scientists say the latest variant may be able to spread rapidly and get around immunity from vaccines and previous infection. The strain has been spotted in several distant states across India and appears to be spreading faster than other variants there. It's also been detected in about 10 other countries, including Australia, Germany, and Canada. Amid the latest resurgence, experts say vaccines and booster shots are the best defense against severe COVID-19. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's government ministries are giving their first reports to President Yoon throughout the week. First up was the Ministry of Economy and Finance, which touched upon plans to deal with inflation, boost trade and stabilize markets. Ji-young brings us highlights from that session.
South Korean government ministries have begun making reports to the president this week, with the first to go on Monday being the Ministry of Economy and Finance. The report was delivered at the Yongsan presidential office, and unlike in the past, the president's session with Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho was kept small for the sake of efficiency. The vice minister said the agenda covered major projects now underway.
This time we have selected projects that we're working on in 7 key areas and will report their progress and future plans.
With inflation soaring, the top priority is stabilizing people's livelihoods. The Finance Ministry will put together a task force to closely monitor and stabilize consumer prices and will come up with measures next month ahead of a national holiday, Chuseok, which comes in September. Another big pillar covers economic issues at home and abroad. The ministry plans to strengthen supply chains in key industries, including semiconductors and shipbuilding. Also, it'll preemptively deal with risks in the real estate and financial markets and long-term issues, including the shrinking population and carbon neutrality. Under the Yoon administration's private-led economy policy, the ministry has set up a private-public task force tasked with finding unnecessary regulations to eliminate and plans to announce measures within this month. And as the national debt hits record highs, the ministry reported its major fiscal reform plan, the details of which will be announced in September. Other major topics are restructuring government spending to further support key projects and reforming public institutions to enhance efficiency and provide quality services to the public. Also, there'll be major reforms to the tax system focused on revitalizing people's livelihoods, which will be announced next week. President Yoon told Finance Minister that measures should be in place to ease the tax burden on public who are suffering due to surging inflation. Also, he added that preemptive measures are needed to stabilize prices during the national Chuseok holiday. The next to give their reports on Tuesday will be the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy and the Ministry of SMEs and Startups. 엄지영, Arirang News.
President Yoon will stop taking questions from reporters on his way to work for the time being, due to concerns over a resurgence of COVID-19. According to the top office, the short presser will be temporarily halted to minimize contact with other people. Yoon has been speaking to reporters at the press line on the way to work, but on Monday morning he skipped the presser. The sessions will resume as soon as the COVID-19 situation stabilizes. As of Monday, there have been 11 confirmed cases among reporters in the span of 5 days.
Today, South Korea's rival parties will seek to strike a deal to form the next leadership of the nation's legislative branch. The former leadership's team for the first half of the 21st National Assembly ended in late May. Party floor leaders Kwon Sung-dong from ruling People Party and his counterpart Park Hong-gun from the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea will meet at 11 a.m. at the National Assembly in an effort to reach a final decision on committee chair picks. The two parties have yet to reach a compromise on the issue despite electing a new National Assembly Speaker and deputy speakers earlier this month. Senior U.S. officials are being dispatched across Asia following State Secretary Antony Blinken's trip to the region. Washington said Monday the State Department Counselor Derek Chollet is visiting South Korea this week to discuss an array of issues including threats posed by North Korea. It explained he will meet with South Korean government officials as well as representatives from academia and civil society to discuss ways to bolster the ROK-U.S. alliance. Separately, Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs Daniel Crittenbrink will travel to Cambodia and Japan this week to discuss bilateral relations. From August, Seoul and Washington will be holding regular joint military drills. Held twice a year, the exercise was scaled back in recent years, but that's about to change this year and may even involve field training as well. Bae Eun-ji provides a glimpse of what to expect.
South Korea's military will be conducting virtual military exercises with the U.S. from August 22nd to September 1st. But an informed military source reportedly said Monday that the two countries are considering whether to include live field training and that this will be decided after reviewing different types of situations. The biannual joint military exercise is held every spring and summer, but had been scaled back in recent years. First in 2018 as part of efforts to denuclearize North Korea, after then-President Donald Trump held a summit with the North leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore. And it wasn't able to go back to the same scale as before because of the pandemic. So for the past few years, only virtual training called CCPT, or computer simulated command post exercise, has been held, using minimal personnel. Meanwhile, the upcoming joint training comes at a time when North Korea has also begun its summertime military drill. After heavy rain, some of the North's military units are also reportedly working on repairing damage from flooding.
Starting July, the North Korean military appears to be conducting its summertime military exercise. But we assess part of this has been affected by COVID-19 and heavy rain in the area, and we are closely monitoring the situation.
Amid rising tensions on the Korean peninsula after Pyongyang was seen almost ready for its first nuclear test in 5 years and growing missile threats, Seoul is trying to bolster its joint defense readiness with Washington. Tues, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. COVID-19 cases have recently been on the rise in South Korea, with daily cases increasing more than twofold compared to last week, with no peak in sight yet.
The country has arguably let its guard down since cases started to slow, but should the country roll back some of its measures right now? For more on this, we have Dr. Howard Lee with us. Good morning.
Morning, and thank you for having me.
First, how serious is the situation in South Korea right now, and when do you think we will see the peak of this new potential wave?
We are riding a new wave of the COVID-19 battle right now. The numbers of new cases and hospitalized patients are on the rise, and they are expected to become significantly greater in a couple more weeks to come. We are basically following the precedents in other countries, such as Israel, Germany, the UK, and the US, with several weeks apart. Based on the previous resurgent experiences, we will see another peak hitting probably in next month. This anticipation is supported by the fact that BA.5 has started dominating the COVID-19 virus surveillance in South Korea quite recently, which rose to 25% last week, almost tripled from 10% a week before.
And Professor Lee, well, the Omicron subvariant BA.5, now that seems to be the strain that's spreading very rapidly, not just here in South Korea, but everywhere else in the world as well. So what are some characteristics that we should really be aware of?
The BA.5 subvariant is by far the most infectious variant we have seen. Scientists call BA.5 immune, quote-unquote, evasive, which means vaccination or even previous infection doesn't help you from getting it. That said, the symptoms are pretty much similar to those caused by other Omicron subvariants, such as BA.1 and BA.2. Mostly, sore throat, runny nose, and sneezing are the symptoms a typical BA.5 patient may suffer from. However, since BA.5 is more infectious and it evades immunity more easily than other Omicron subvariants, it may pose a bigger health problem to the society as a whole.
Right, and talking about society, South Korea has lifted most of its COVID-19 prevention measures, but the government is discussing rolling back some of the measures. How strict do you think the prevention measures have to be this time around? For example, should international traveling be kind of limited again?
I don't think we can go back to the measures in the previous resurgences. People are already tired of strict social distancing. Wearing a face mask, however, is something that we can do, which also has been shown to be effective. The problem, I think, is that we have too many undetected cases hiding in the community. So increasing the number of PCR tests is certainly an option the government should consider, which can become more effective when they are provided free of charge. Banning international travels, I think, is not as effective as we want it to be at this particular moment.
And well, that's of course the vaccination question, of course, Professor. The majority of people here in South Korea are already vaccinated, but is that going to make any difference ahead of a new wave, or are people going to have to now get an extra shot?
As I said earlier, vaccines are not helpful to protect you from getting infected by BA.5. However, I'm not saying vaccines are useless. quite contrary. They are still likely to provide good protection against severe disease, hospitalization, and death. And this is particularly true for people over 60 and those with less immune capability. Unfortunately, data on the efficacy of boosters against these newer subvariants are still lacking. But if previous experience is anything to go by, vaccines are likely to help reinstate immune protection in those who were infected or vaccinated some time ago.
And Professor, just one more question before we let you go. So in your book as well, you highlight the importance of taking scientific measures in order to address the pandemic. And with the Yoon administration, with President Yoon also having emphasized the same thing, perhaps you read your book, what do you hope to see from the new administration?
Well, I think so far so good. And the new administration, I think, is getting more people from academia, industry, and other areas, not depending on which political stance each person is having on. So I think the new administration has started much better in terms of scientific sort of diversity. In other words, they have been trying to get as much information as possible, as many opinions as possible, which I think is very important. Instead of listening to some people who are politically geared toward the administration, but having more people coming together, sitting on the same table all together at the same time, I think that's a good start.
Certainly, and well, hopefully we will continue to see more scientific, evidence-based policies going forward. And this is where we're going to have to leave it today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Lee.
Thank you so much.
And that wraps up the first half of New Day at Arirang.
But do stick around. Coming up in the second half, we have coverage of South Korea's new energy policy as the new government rolls back plans to move away from nuclear power. We discuss the benefits for South Koreans and what it means for the country's efforts to go carbon neutral. So do stay with us. Join us in a moment for the second half of New Day at Arirang.
Share South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduce a Korean new day. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
넌 볼 수 없고 가질 수 없어 뚝뚝 뭘 쏟아내도 뜨거운 자태 한번 비추지 않고 내게만 가치란 그녀는 유명한 서울의 별 다 어딨나 In your eye 걔와 함께면 넌 디스토피아 내 발걸음 따라오면 유토피아 나의
I feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good, but right now, maybe this is forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now, forever.
Welcome back to the second half of New Day at Arirang. For those who drive in South Korea, new traffic regulations are being implemented in South Korea starting today.
The changes were mostly made to further protect pedestrians, especially at intersections. Our Tae Min-jung went out on the streets to walk us through the new rules.
Police officers are out on the streets, making people aware of new traffic rules. The new regulations come into place from Tuesday to better protect pedestrians. One of the biggest changes is at intersections. All vehicles now must stop completely before making a turn to the right when there are pedestrians crossing the crosswalk. When the traffic light ahead is red, drivers must stop even just for a brief moment. They may then slowly turn right if there are no pedestrians crossing the crosswalk. And if there is an accident, drivers will be held responsible for driving while the traffic light is on red. What if the traffic light ahead is green? If there are no pedestrians on the crosswalk, drivers will not be required to stop and they may turn right at a slow speed. However, if there are pedestrians, again, drivers must stop.
Simply put, when there are pedestrians crossing or even getting ready to cross the crosswalk, all vehicles must stop completely until the wheels don't move. Drivers who do not comply by the rules have to pay 60,000 won or around $46.
Another major change has been made in school zones. When driving in child protection zones near schools, vehicles must stop at crosswalks even if there are no traffic lights. Drivers must also come to a complete stop even if there's nobody at the crosswalk.
It's not about enforcing stricter laws, but more about raising awareness. Many countries, such as those in Europe, already have a driving culture focused on pedestrians. With the newly imposed rules, South Korea can also shift its focus away from drivers and more toward pedestrians.
Last year in South Korea, 1 in 3 car accident deaths involved pedestrians. This is more than 50% higher than the OECD average. As the figure suggests, there is still much to be done to keep pedestrians safe, but these new regulations could be a step in the right direction. Tae Min-jung, Arirang News.
Many priceless pieces of Korea's cultural heritage have been lost over the centuries. Some estimate more than 200,000, but a number of them are now on display at the National Palace Museum of Korea. Kim Hyun-sung has the full story.
Years of colonization, wars, invasions, and looting have left holes in the country's treasure trove. Valuable cultural artifacts ended up missing or stranded overseas. But about 40 cultural artifacts have been safely returned home. They're on show here at the National Palace Museum of Korea. Some are on display to the public for the first time in history. Like this box with inlaid mother-of-pearl, plum, bird, and bamboo design, and this book of calligraphy by Joseon kings, both from the late Joseon dynasty. Exhibition opened on the 7th of this month through the help of Overseas Korean Cultural Heritage Foundation, and it will run until September 25th.
This exhibition highlights the efforts to bring back our cultural heritage that were overseas. Through this exhibition, we wanted many people to think about what we should do to protect our heritage overseas.
We've calculated the distance our employees have traveled to retrieve these artifacts over the past 10 years. The sheer distance added up would be the same as about 160 times around the Earth. We have infinite responsibility to bring back what's our symbolic cultural heritage.
Every artifact here tells its own story. Some were lost during a war. Some came back through donation or an auction. These seals were brought home through joint efforts led by South Korea and the U.S., who worked together to track down and bring them back home. But there's still much to recover.
About 210,000 cultural properties are still overseas. A lot of cultural artifacts are wilting away because we don't know where they are or because places that have them can't take proper care of them.
As for now, there is no international law that guarantees the safe return of cultural heritages, even ones that have been illegally taken, making these cultural treasures way back home long and winding. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. South Korea's Yoon administration has been actively pushing to revive the country's nuclear energy industry amid the ongoing global energy supply shortage and the global shift towards renewable sources of power. Now, last week, the new government raised the target share of nuclear power in the country's energy mix to 30% or more by 2030, raising its previous goal and further moving away from the previous administration's pledge to phase out nuclear power. The Energy Ministry expects the move to not only benefit to boost the heavily fossil-dependent country's energy security, but also its economic prospects too, by increasing exports and fostering startups, as well as new jobs in the country. So we discussed the prospects ahead with Seo Kyun-yeol, Professor Emeritus of Nuclear Engineering at Seoul National University, and Jonathan Cobb, Senior Communication Manager at the World Nuclear Association. Now, very warm welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us. And for you, Dr. Cobb, very late time in London. Thank you for joining us. And well, my first question to you, Professor Seo, on the domestic developments that we've seen. Now, what are the biggest changes or developments that you expect to see with the new government set to expand the country's use of nuclear energy?
I realize indeed that nuclear power is making a great comeback, both home and abroad, and everybody's trying to seize the opportunities. Korea is one of them. And I think 11 years have passed since Fukushima accident, or disaster rather. But in view of the Russian invasion to Ukraine and all those other instability issues in the energy market, I believe many other countries are eyeing nuclear at the same time. And Korea is certainly one of them again, and trying to ride this tide as far as it can.
And Professor Seo, how much of the country relies on nuclear energy right now here in South Korea?
I think it's currently, it was, if my memory serves me, it was 27% last year in terms of power generation. And the current administration is trying to push forward toward 30% by 2030. So that's going to be a big boost.
And Dr. Cobb, now amid this energy supply crunch that the world is experiencing, do you think nuclear power is going to help with South Korea's energy security? Is it an effective way to go about it?
Yes, as the professor said, 27% of electricity already comes from nuclear energy, and that's looking to expand. And it was only last month that the Shin Hanul-1 reactor started up, and that's now supplying a large amount of electricity to the South Korean grid. And with every unit of electricity, that reduces the dependence there is on gas supplies and fossil fuel supplies. It provides that low carbon alternative. So it is making a major contribution to energy security. And I think that is something that is going to continue into the future, both in South Korea and worldwide. And one of the reasons for that is that the same energy sources that are providing alternatives to fossil fuels from an energy security point of view, nuclear energy and renewables, they're the same low carbon electricity generation options that the world is already turning to at speed to try to aim for net zero carbon emissions by 2050.
And Dr. Cobb, how crucial is the use of nuclear energy in the mix of various renewable energies? I mean, how effective is it compared to other sources of renewables?
It's a very low carbon energy form of electricity. The amount of greenhouse gas emissions in the full life cycle, taking in account mining, manufacture of the fuel, construction of the reactors themselves, is of a similar low level as is the case for wind and solar. So it does make a very major contribution to reducing emissions. Another major benefit of nuclear energy, of course, it operates at very high regular output, so 24/7 constant output from the nuclear power stations. And that can help support generation from renewables, which in the case of wind and solar can be intermittent. So by putting the nuclear energy alongside the intermittent renewables, you can aim for a much lower overall carbon mix in your generation of electricity.
And Professor Ha, well, with the Yoon administration really pushing to expand the nuclear sector here, this is not only expected to benefit huge companies that build power plants abroad or export smaller reactors, but it's expected to benefit South Korean households as well. The government's hoping that this will create around 5,000 startups by 2030 and also create thousands of new jobs. And well, when are South Koreans going to start feeling the benefits of nuclear energy, and what kind of process needs to take place between now and then to really set up and broaden nuclear power generation?
I think it's a great question. First of all, by doing this, the fossil fuel import dependency on the Korean side will be downsized from about 88% to 60% by 2030. And second of all, Korea will be resuming again, as Dr. pointed out, reconstruction work on Shinhanul units 5 and 6, actually 3 and 4 rather, and extending the operations of 10 existing nuclear reactors by 2030. Those might have been prematurely and basically permanently shut down in the previous government, but that has been turned upside down. Actually, we just made a U-turn. So second of all, also Shinggori units 3 and 4 are going to be resuming operation. Actually, and also Shinggori units 5 and 6 will be starting commercial operation sooner rather than later. So this will be really boosting to more portfolio as far as nuclear is concerned. And so certainly, but surely under a new president, Yoon Suk-yeol, Korea's nuclear industry will be going full steam ahead.
And Professor Ha, well, the nuclear power issue has been subject to a lot of political changes, and the previous Moon administration's policy of phasing out nuclear energy really didn't make sense to many scientists. And well, what have been the challenges of fostering nuclear power generation given the whole political back and forth over the industry?
Long story short, the national energy mix has to be based on science and technology and driven by economy and the market, and supported by the public in general, and also accepted by them. So it should never, ever fall victim to politicians, lobbyists, or activists. And that should not happen again.
And Dr. Kopp, how is the situation in the UK, for instance? Is nuclear power generation something that is quite political? And how do you manage to keep a balance between, science and what the people want?
I think on the issue of what the people want, it's to ensure that when the nuclear industry has plans, when governments are putting together policies where they are looking increasingly to use nuclear energy as part of their environmental and energy policy mix, there is an absolute need to have dialogue with the public, with local communities, to make sure that they're fully engaged with what is being proposed, that they see the benefits not only in terms of the generation itself, but also the benefits that can result for local communities, not only the thousands of jobs that can be directly generated if you have construction and operation of nuclear power plants, but also the follow-on benefits for local communities where that highly trained, well-paid workforce then is investing their money in local businesses, and you see local businesses all around nuclear power plants benefiting from that economic activity that they generate. In terms of the UK, there is actually good political agreement with both the current Conservative government and also the main opposition party, the Labour Party. They both see nuclear as playing an important role alongside other low-carbon energy sources in our energy system in the future. So at the moment, there are 2 reactors under construction in the UK, and there are proposals for several more to start construction over the next few years from 2030 onwards, as well as investment in new technologies such as small modular reactors. Small modular reactors, there are a wide range of them, and they have different applications. So one of the most important things to do is not only decarbonize electricity, but also look to decarbonize other heavy energy intensive processes, like industrial processes that require high levels of heat. You can't generate high temperature heat at scale from renewables. Nuclear is really the technology that is most applicable for doing that. So it is something I think that's recognized in the UK and worldwide as important for decarbonisation, not only of electricity, but many other sectors.
And of course, as Dr. Kopp said, it's crucial to engage citizens and really heed their voices and also listen to their concerns and address them in moving forward. And Professor Seol, well, there's been a lot of concern about how nuclear waste is going to be disposed of. What are currently some efforts that are being made to address these kind of concerns?
Oops, this is a good point, because this is sort of like a Achilles heel when we're talking about nuclear energy. And dealing with the dangerous radioactive nuclear waste is an urgent and national matter, in fact. And in this example, I think Finland has the first of its kind deep geological repository site, which is about to begin operation in 2025, again, if my memory serves me. So that's a high example, but as far as Korea is concerned, I don't see any light in the end of the tunnel. And any attempt to expand nuclear power excessively without having the solution upfront is going to be a fantasy. So I think we'll have to do something sooner rather than later.
Well, hopefully the conversation will keep going and we'll start to see progress. As South Korea does work towards carbon neutrality, we are going to need a lot more options. And well, Dr. Kopp, now, how competitive are Korea's nuclear plant exports? The country's also looking to expand its exports of smaller reactors as well, which you mentioned earlier. So what really is South Korea's competitive edge in the global market?
Well, there are many countries and many companies that are now involved in the construction of new nuclear reactors, as they are being used increasingly worldwide, and there seems to be the need for a large expansion of nuclear generation worldwide. So I think South Korea has demonstrated its ability to export reactors through the plant that's been constructed at the UAE in Baraka, and that plant is coming online. The first 2 units of 4 have come online, so that does demonstrate a capability there. I think it certainly would be the case that any country that would be considering South Korea as a partner alongside all the other vendors that there are, it's going to be more reassured by the fact that South Korea itself is recommitting itself to new nuclear construction, to maintaining nuclear's role in the energy mix, because they will then know that South Korea is going to retain the skills that are so vital for both construction and operation of nuclear reactors. And that is something that certainly will be now a weakness that South Korea may have had with the previous phase-out policy, which has now been rectified.
And Dr. Kopp, while the European Union, the EU Parliament, they recognise nuclear energy and gas as environmentally sustainable energy sources, and they voted to include the 2 sources in the EU taxonomy. And that's, of course, a list of economic activities deemed green. So do you think this could give somewhat of a boost to South Korea's nuclear energy exports? And do you see more and more countries starting to adopt this kind of policy posture?
Well, I think that's the key thing. The EU taxonomy is something where they have looked at nuclear energy in particular in great detail. A scientific body, the JRC, looked at nuclear because it was considered separately from the other sustainable technologies that are in the taxonomy. And that study concluded that nuclear energy was at least the match of other sustainable energy sources, other sustainable technology. And that's why it has been included and now is recognized as being an appropriate use of sustainable finance. And that's important for Europe, but it's also important worldwide. And what I'm hoping now is that, having seen the rigor with which Europe evaluated nuclear energy, other taxonomies that are being developed in different regions will also include nuclear in the same way. And we will see increasing investment from sustainable funds recognizing nuclear's role in a long-term clean energy future.
And Professor Seol, you being at the forefront of research in nuclear energy here, how do you see the country's potential in expanding its global market in terms of related technology exports?
I guess the leading edge is on the side of construction, because as I see it, Korea has the competitiveness in pricing. For example, it costs about $2,000 per kilo of electricity for Korea to build one nuclear power plant, whereas it costs about more than $4,000 for France and for the United States for the same job. So if you take these figures into consideration, it's just half the price. And I believe this is the world record. And as Dr. Kopp has already pointed out, we have proven the competitiveness in terms of the construction on time, on budget, without any delay. And so I'm sure that Korea has really just met golden opportunities home and abroad. And just to add some of few words is relating to small modular reactors, because we're also developing small modular reactor called SMART, and that has to do with the developing a reactor which may produce 300 megawatts of thermal power, as opposed to 3,000 megawatts thermal in case of large power reactors. So we might be dealing with this kind of economies of series rather than economies of scale, if we can rely on mass production in the factory. And then someday, these small modular reactors may turn out to be a game changer, so sexy that everybody may want to jump on this one of these days. So that's my hope. And then I really hope this may turn out to be a reality on some of these days.
Well, you certainly can't turn down a very good bargain, especially a very attractive one at that. And well, hopefully this will be a chance for South Korea to expand its exports abroad, not only in the Middle East, but also in the European markets too, with cost effectiveness, as you pointed out, Professor. Well, this is where we're going to have to leave the interview today, but that was Seol Gun-yo, Professor Emeritus of Nuclear Engineering at Seoul National University, and Jonathan Cobb, Senior Communication Manager at the World Nuclear Association. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley, standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning to you guys.
Hi Matt, let's start in the UK, where it's been revealed when we can expect to know who will be the next Prime Minister.
Well, that's right, Soo-young. The date looks set for September 5th. And that's when we'll know the final result of the ballot when Conservative Party members pick between the final two candidates. Now, so far, 11 Conservative MPs have officially put their names forward for the post. All hopeful candidates need at least 20 nominations from among the party's 358 lawmakers. A series of votes by the lawmakers will then reduce that number to 2 final candidates. Finally, a postal ballot of the Conservative Party's 200,000 members will take place in the summer to choose the winner. The contest to replace Boris Johnson comes after lawmakers forced the Prime Minister to step down following a series of scandals. Now, moving over to India, which is set to become the most populous country in the world by 2023, overtaking China's 1.4 billion people. Now, this is according to a UN report released to mark World Population Day. Now, despite the growing slowest rate of global population growth since 1950, the world's population could peak at 10.4 billion people by the 2080s. However, population expansion is uneven, as more than half the growth will happen in just 8 countries, including the Philippines, Ethiopia, India and Nigeria. Meanwhile, the EU's population is seeing a decline on the back of COVID-19. This is according to figures from Eurostat on Monday, and the number of people across the 27 member countries fell by roughly 172,000 in 2021, following a drop of 656,000 the previous year. Now, this comes as the region saw over 2 million COVID-19 related deaths. Former Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone is being charged with fraud and false representation. Now, this follows an overseas assets investigation by the UK's Revenue and Customs Department. The 91-year-old faces charges of failing to declare his assets after allegedly hiding assets worth over $475 million. Ecclestone ran Formula One for 40 years before being ousted in 2017. His time there saw Ecclestone build up a fortune amounting to an estimated $2.9 billion. The first images from the largest space telescope ever built are set to finally be released. After its launch into space on December 25, 2021, the James Webb Telescope's first images will be broadcast live on NASA TV and YouTube at 10:30 a.m. Tuesday, Eastern Standard Time. Now, this comes after US President Joe Biden unveiled a single deep field picture of space called Webb's First Deep Field. This was during a preview at the White House. The image is the deepest and highest resolution infrared view ever taken of the universe. Future images from the telescope promise a look at stars and galaxies that emerged in the aftermath of the Big Bang.
Good morning. It looks to be as hot as yesterday, although East Coast regions, including Sokcho and Pohang, will have much more comfortable temperatures in the mid-20s this afternoon. In fact, all the heat alerts have been lifted. It's just the high humidity that's making it feel quite unpleasant. And there's still a chance of sudden rain in southern parts of the country through tonight. Jeju and east of Gangwon-do province could see showers, and Jeju could see up to 40 millimeters of rainfall along with heat today. So it's going to be quite muggy there. Overnight heat made it difficult for people on Jeju and in Jeollado province to sleep, with more tropical nights forecast there. And highs will be slightly higher than yesterday, 30 to 31 degrees Celsius, which isn't too bad, with lots of clouds hovering around the country. Seoul will be going up to 31 degrees, but Jeju is still very warm at 33 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, monsoon rain returns tomorrow nationwide, along with much relief from the heat on Wednesday. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe. Well, Toyam, we're talking about nuclear energy today, and well, it certainly looks like we need more options because electricity prices have been soaring like crazy with the cost of living crisis as well, right?
Well, it's kind of an awkward conversation, but I do still live with my parents. So, that side, for me, I'm blinded.
Your parents get to foot the bill, but as for me, it's going insane. And, apparently it's at a record high right now, electricity prices with the shortage as well. So
we're definitely going to have to lower the AC a little bit, despite the heat that we're feeling. But that wraps up our news case for this hour, but we'll be back throughout the day and look out for the updates later in the day.
We'll be coming back with our Wednesday's edition tomorrow, so do join us then. But do stick around for more updates throughout the day. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.
오늘